Vanessa! I heard my mom cry out. My wife looked at me and sighed. As she walked out, I followed behind her to make sure no argument took place between the two. Poppy, our new 4-year-old poodle, had yet again defecated in my mom's chair. She was trained, but she hadn't quite gotten used to our house, even after being here for a month. "This precious little beast has yet again ruined my chair," she said while ruffling the Poppy's white fur coat lovingly. "I would have done it, Casper, but you know how my back has been," she said while looking at me with solemn eyes. "My brother will be coming over for lunch. I haven't seen him in such a long time," she said to Vanessa. "I was supposed to meet my dad for lunch. I mentioned it last night," Vanessa said, slumping her shoulders. "Oh, come on. It's just one day. I'm sure he won't mind rescheduling," she said, walking out of the door, holding the leashes of her 2 dogs, pulling them outside. "Casper," Vanessa whispered to me. "I'm sorry, honey," I said to her. "She does it intentionally. She hasn't forgotten it yet. I just mentioned it at dinner." "Honey, maybe she did forget. She's an old woman." My wife just stared at me and shook her head. "I'm not asking Dad to reschedule. He has been wanting to see Charlie for such a long time." I sighed. "I will call work and tell them I'll be late. I'll make lunch. You can go out with your dad, okay?" She gave me a tight-lipped smile and walked away. Mom had moved in with us after Dad's death a year ago. She mentioned being lonely at home and kept suggesting that we take her in. She had never liked Vanessa, but I had never realized she despised her so much until she started living with us. She criticized everything Vanessa did, but I still believe it's just her age. She's not an evil woman, just set in her ways. I can't say it has been easy. Some days are just harder than others, but I always manage to convince Vanessa to have a little more patience. All I can do is keep faith that my family can stick together. When I met Vanessa, she was a single mother, not only raising her 1-year-old daughter, Charlie, on her own, but also helping her retired father with his daily expenses. I met her at church one Sunday and fell for her instantly. She was not only breathtakingly beautiful, but incredibly kind, humble, and courageous. It had been difficult to convince Mom that I was marrying a single mother, but after my undue persuasion, she finally agreed. However, it wouldn't have been a wedding without some drama. When Vanessa had walked out with her simple but elegant white dress, my mother, without restraint, had commented, "Couldn't you have bought anything else?" It had taken me 1 whole hour to calm a vexed and nervous Vanessa. It had delayed our wedding, but fortunately, the priest agreed to wait and we got married. I officially adopted Charlie on her 3rd birthday. She was an endearing little thing and had me wrapped around her little finger from the first time she held mine. It was a big change for me, but somehow it always felt at home with them. "Casper, I've been thinking. Charlie's turning 5 next month, and we should start looking for schools," Vanessa said as she walked out with her purse, holding Charlie's chubby hand. "Well, of course, I've been thinking of sending her to Mauve Elementary. She's all grown up now," I said, smirking at Charlie and picking her up. "It will be a little expensive, but it does have a great curriculum to make Charlie a smart little woman," Vanessa replied, flashing her daughter a smile. "Well, only the best for our little Cherry," I said. "I will pick up the forms on my way then," Vanessa said, holding out her arms for Charlie. Just then we saw the door open and Mom walked in. She stared at Vanessa and Charlie as they were leaving, but didn't utter a word. I was surprised, but I thought it was still better than her usual snarky remark. I thought the rain was over, but little did I know that the storm was yet to begin. I sat at lunch with Mom and my uncle. He and Mom were very similar. He was old-fashioned and didn't approve of Vanessa either. I imagined that my marriage had only brought the 2 siblings closer. "Well, this morning I had such difficulty with my walk," Mom said suddenly. "Is it your back, Mom?" I asked nonchalantly. "No, but my eyesight sighed Casper. I think I might need more monthly allowance. I need to buy a guide dog. Mom responded, stirring her soup slowly. Mom, we already have 2 dogs. You haven't even been to a doctor yet. How do you know you need a guide dog? Well, of course, I know. After all, nobody knows my health better than me, she retorted, rather agitated. Besides, it's only a little more allowance. You have a lot of savings. I'm sure you can manage it. I don't want to interfere with your family, especially after the way Vanessa treated me this morning. It's better for me to be busy with the dogs. Mom, Vanessa, I started. However, I decided to ignore her comments about Vanessa and instead continued. How about we go to a doctor first? You know how expensive guide dogs are, I replied, looking at her kindly. Not more than Mauve Elementary? She muttered under her breath as she picked up the dishes. I thought I had heard wrong. We hadn't even mentioned the school to Mom yet. My mother is an old woman, and she isn't the kindest one, but I have to give her the benefit of the doubt. I got up quietly, bid my farewell to them, and left for work. When I returned home, the atmosphere seemed uneasy. Vanessa is a patient woman, but today she looked angry. I caught her eye and raised an eyebrow. So, today, Mom told Charlie that she's an expensive brat, Vanessa said, her eyes unwavering. Is she not? Mom replied coldly. Vanessa took a sharp breath and said, I don't know what this is about, but I won't tolerate such words for my daughter. Look at you, acting all high and mighty. I heard both of you talking about Mauve Elementary. I don't understand why she needs a private school. Can't she go to public school? Or even better, just homeschool her. We're going to be on the streets if this continues, Mom shouted. What are you even going to give your own child if you keep spending on her? Mom asked, her gaze fixated on me. She is my own child, I said sternly. Casper, stop joking with yourself. Who knows where she came from? She could be a homeless thief's daughter for all we know. There is nothing special about that kid. Her own father wanted nothing to do with her, Mom cried out impatiently. If Vanessa had been smart enough, she would have had her aborted, Mom continued. I was in complete disbelief. I had never heard Mom utter such words. I looked at Vanessa. Her eyes were blood red, and her lips parted in shock. I always knew this marriage was a wreck. You should have never trusted this girl. She has a baby out of wedlock, but you were so blinded by her. She's going to spend all your money on herself and her daughter. You will be left with nothing but heartache. Mom kept babbling angrily. Vanessa walked out of the living room and came out of our bedroom with a small bag in her left hand and her right clasped around the sleepy Charlie's arm. I am leaving, and I won't come back as long as you have this woman in this house, she said, and walked to the door. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't move. I watched the events unfold around me in a daze. Finally! Good riddance! I heard my mom scream as Vanessa shut the front door with a bang behind her. Mom, stop! I shouted at her. I can't believe you said all those things. You need to apologize to Vanessa right now, I said. Apologize? All I have done is ask for a guide dog. I don't understand why you are so keen on spending your money on a stranger's daughter instead of your own mother, my mom replied. I stormed out of the house without saying anything and noticed the car was gone. Vanessa had left with the car. I walked to a nearby bar and kept calling her. When she didn't pick up, I eventually called my father-in-law. He told me they were safe at home and I should give Vanessa some time. However, he also warned me that Vanessa had made up her mind about my mother and didn't want to raise her daughter in the same house. I walked home in the wee hours of morning. The sun had just etched golden streaks across the sky. Mom was still in bed when I entered my house. I had spent a long time in the bar thinking about the situation at my house, and what should I do about it? As soon as the clock struck 12 p.m., I called my childhood friend who lived in countryside Virginia. It was my mom's hometown, and I had visited my maternal grandparents there every other vacation while they were alive. I asked him to rent out a bedroom apartment. He called me back within a few hours informing that he had found a decent place. I deposited some money in my mom's bank account and went to the living room to talk to her. Oh, yes, that girl has finally left this house. I couldn't have been more glad. I can't believe it has taken her so long to finally give up. You know how much I tried to pester her, but that girl was a hard shell to crack. You were right. All I had to do was pick at her little witch for a few days. Mom was speaking on the phone to someone. Seeing me, she looked flabbergasted. She stammered a goodbye and hung up quickly. Casper, I didn't know you were at home. Where have you been all night? I was so worried. I have been calling Vanessa too. She hasn't been picking up my calls. What a strange woman. She left the house at night. Who does that? My mother said, suddenly looking concerned. Perhaps I would have fallen for her act again, but overhearing her conversations had only made me more confident about my decision. This was no time for small talk, so I decided to get straight to the point. Mom, I need you to leave. What? She replied, confused. I have rented an apartment in Virginia. Dad's monthly retirement pension will be enough for you, and you can live there peacefully. When she didn't reply, I continued. My family life has suffered enough in the last year. I cannot keep up with this. I heard your vile intentions on the phone. I can't believe my own mother has been trying to poison my life. I have decided I will be bringing Vanessa and Charlie home, and you will have to leave. The next few hours, I heard my mom shout profanities at first, and then cry to coax me into letting her stay. It pained me to see that I had to separate the family I tried so hard to keep together, but the hatred I saw in my mother's eyes yesterday was enough to tell me that there was no way to fix it. The only way was for me to choose. My mother, on the other hand, felt sure that I would call her in a few days to apologize, so she left the house in a rage. I watched the taxi disappearing around the block, knowing that I would be never contacting her again. The next morning, I drove to my father-in-law's house. He opened the door, and Charlie rushed to squeeze my legs, looking up at me with her toothless grin. I smiled back at her and ruffled her hair as I greeted my father-in-law. My father-in-law walked out with Charlie, promising her an ice cream. I closed the door as they left, and Vanessa looked at me softly, with her arms folded across her chest. It had taken me a long time to realize the pain my mother had caused Vanessa all these years. I always thought we could shrug off my mother's tongue citing old age, but I hadn't taken a moment to think how vicious it could have been to hear it every day. Vanessa had always opposed my mother moving in with us, but she finally caved in when she saw me dejected about it. Unfortunately, I hadn't been able to respond to her with the same empathy. I filled her in about everything that had happened, and she agreed to move back in immediately. In fact, she offered that I could go see my mom in Virginia on some weekends. However, I had decided that I no longer needed such energy around me. I can learn to be content with the family that I have chosen. I promised her that she would have the life she deserved, and it's a promise I was finally able to keep, especially without the interference of my mother.